want more?
Yeah. Give us another.
What? I'm just going to continue. I'm not going to go to hung like a corpse. Yeah.
Oh.
No, because you're going to have to. Okay, so here we go. My mother crossed over to the other side on July 6, 1992 at 5:02 p.m. She died peacefully with my brother holding her hand. I know this because he called me half an hour later to give me the news. I was alone at our cabin in Canada. I'd finished dinner and I was in the kitchen washing dishes when the phone rang. My mom had not been well. She'd just turned 80 that year and lived in an assisted living facility in Pasadena. Every time I saw her, she would say, "For God's sake, I'm 80." My mother never liked any of the women that I ever brought around or married. She had a particularly hard time with my second wife, Nicolette. It's Nicolette Sheridan, for anybody who didn't know that. She had a particularly hard time with my second wife, Nicolette. She always referred to her as "take a left." So, I'd go and visit her, and she'd say, "So Harry, how's take a left doing?" I would correct her, but she just couldn't get it right. I was never sure if it was the dementia or if she just saw right through the girl. Nicolette was off in London visiting her grandparents when I got the call. My brother told me that Mom had made him executor of the estate and that he would take care of the arrangements while I was away, but that we ought to have a little memorial back in LA within a couple of weeks. He described once again how she died and that she really looked at peace. I hung up the phone, went back to the stack of dirty dishes I was washing, and a few minutes later, as I was finishing up, I looked up and I caught my reflection in the steamy window above the sink. I was whistling. A big grin on my face. I was shocked that I was feeling so good, having just heard that seemingly the most important person in my life was gone forever. I had that thought and kept whistling. That night, I reflected on the smile in the window a moment. I realized that what a shitty relationship I'd had with my mom. I took a flight back to LA the next day. The memorial service was indeed small, just the immediate family, about 8 of us. As we left our house for the service, I was mortified to see that my wife, who would return from her trip to England, had chosen a red outfit with a wide-brimmed white hat, red lipstick, and huge sunglasses to wear to the funeral. That was take left for you. As the executor of the estate, my brother spent the next year liquidating anything that was left and presumably finding a final resting place for my mom's ashes. We went on with our lives. Take a Left ran off with a pop singer. We divorced. I met Lisa Rinna from Medford, Oregon. We fell in love and built a life together. We did lots of fun things like get married and have kids and travel. And all was as it should be until one fall day in the year 2000 when I went into the basement of our Beverly Hills home to find a suitcase for a quick trip to New York. Now, our basement, like all basements, is a repository for all the stuff that we're done with but can't bring ourselves to toss out. Most of the stuff, like old shoes, old clothes, old toys, etc., is stuffed into shopping bags and hauled down to the basement for a while until we get around to putting it in plastic bags and then taking it to the garage, where it stays for a few months until it's too hard to open the car doors, and then someone takes the stuff to the storage space where it will sit for decades. Now, this has always struck me as an odd American habit, but I guess it's just the way it is. But the day I went down looking for my suitcase, I found something unexpected in the midst of all that junk. That day, the basement contained the usual assortment of shopping bags full of old shoes and stuff. There was a Barney's New York bag, and a Tommy Hilfiger bag, and a Ralph Lauren bag, and a Saks bag. And then there was a smallish bag with a much less familiar logo, at least in our household. There, sandwiched between the Saks bag and the Hilfiger bag, was a little white bag that said J.C. Penney. Pennies? I reached down and grabbed the interloping sack. It was heavy for its size and it appeared to be stapled shut. What on earth? I tore open the staples and saw a white plastic box with a label on one side that I couldn't read because it was upside down. I pulled the box out of the bag, turned it over, and to my horror, saw that it was Mom. The ignominy. It had come to that. My mother unceremoniously stuffed into a pennies bag and left to gather dust on the basement floor. I immediately dumped out the Hilfiger bag and gently After all, she had been a Republican and was loved red, white, and blue. I called my brother and I said, "What the fuck?" He told me that he'd come to the house that summer while we were away and convinced the housekeeper to let him in. That's when he spirited Mom into the basement. He explained that he'd kept her in the trunk of his Cutlass for almost a decade. And as his life had bottomed out, he figured that her ashes being in the trunk must have been a contributing factor. He said he didn't know what else to do with her, so he just dropped her off unannounced. My brother continues to deal with his issues, as do we all, but at that moment I needed to find a suitable resting place for the woman who had carried me to term through a cigarette smoke-filled alcoholic haze. How did any of us survive that time when women smoked like chimneys and drank like fish throughout their pregnancies? Not to mention the pills. I mean, if, as they say, you are what you eat, then my mom was, by extension, and through birth, so am I, an amalgamation of nicotine, dexedrine, Emperin codeine number 2, Seconal, and Bombay gin. There was even a decade when she added a substance she called hangover juice to that mix, created by the good Dr. Max Jacobson. This substance, which was also used by Jack Kennedy when he was president, was later found to be mainly speed with some strong-smelling vitamin B thrown in for effect. My father dutifully injected it into my mother's buttock every morning. But the problem still nagged. What to do with Mom? I decided that she should go home to be with her dad in the town where she was born. She'd never really been happy in Southern California, and I remembered that she sort of lit up when we talked about her youth in Twin Falls, Idaho. Her father, Clarence Robinson, had been a successful banker in Twin Falls back in the day, and I thought it would be probably good to find out where he was buried, maybe piggyback Mom onto his grave. Although the idea seemed faintly incestuous, I figured it was the best possible solution. With a little research, I did indeed locate my grandfather's cemetery. I called them up, told them my plan, and to my surprise, they said, "Come on up." I told Lisa I was going on a little road trip. I put the Tommy Hilfiger bag in the passenger seat of my 1996 Toyota 4Runner, installed a voice-activated tape recorder to the visor over where I was driving, and I spent 18 hours in that car with her, having the conversation that we never had while she was alive. It was a little one-sided. I still have those tapes, but I've never listened to them. Mom and I worked out a lot of stuff on that drive, but not quite everything. When I got to Twin Falls, I gave her to the nice man at the cemetery and watched as a small backhoe dug a hole right where my grandfather Clarence's crotch would be. There was something a little perverse about that, at the same time satisfying. It was a gray day, and the guy digging the hole turned off the engine of his backhoe and asked if I wanted to say a few words after he laid the box into the ground. I nodded, walked over to the pathetic little hole with a pathetic little box in it, gazed around the grounds for a dandelion or some other wildflower that I might toss into the hole, but it was the wrong time of year, and there were only dead weeds around, so I just said, "Bye, Mom," turned around and left, and well, that was that.